A 74-year-old man once sat in front of me, his hands trembling slightly. Not because of illness, not because of medication, but because of a quiet truth he had only just realized. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Doctor, I didn't know. For all these years, I've been unintentionally hurting myself." He wasn't the first man to say that. In fact, he was one of thousands of older men I've met over more than 3 decades as a urologist. Men who silently faced the changes in their bodies without anyone ever explaining them. We grew up in a time when self-pleasure was treated as a secret, something never discussed. And because of that, when the body began to change, many men had no idea how to adapt. There is one thing most men after 60 are never prepared for. Self-pleasure does not disappear with age, but it changes. And if you do not change with it, you may unintentionally harm yourself. It's not the action that causes harm, but the way you do it. The way you have done it the same for 20, 30, 50 years, even though your body is now completely different. I am Dr. Mohit Kara, a specialist in older men's health. And today, I want to share with you 5 secrets about self-pleasure that many men wish they had known earlier. Truths that can protect your masculinity, your health, your circulation, your prostate, and your emotional well-being. This is not a video to judge you or make you feel ashamed. This is an honest, slow, and necessary conversation. One that many men go their entire lives without ever hearing. And if you are here, it means you are brave enough to understand your body, to care for it properly, and to preserve the strength that age can never take away. Secret number 1, erection is no longer everything. One quiet morning in the clinic, a 72-year-old man named Leonard walked in with a conflicted look on his face. He was the kind of man who had been strong his entire life. A Navy veteran, later a factory manager, then a retiree tending a backyard full of fruit trees. But that day he sat down, lowered his head, and said in a trembling voice, "Doctor, my body doesn't respond the way it used to. I feel like I'm no longer a man." That sentence was anything but unfamiliar. In more than 30 years as a urologist, I have heard it repeated by countless older men. Men who spent their entire lives being strong, carrying responsibilities, and never allowing themselves to appear weak, yet suddenly felt defeated by the quiet changes happening inside their bodies. Not because they were in pain, but because they feared those changes were taking away their sense of worth. Leonard believed that an erection was the center of all masculinity. Many men of his generation believed the same. They were taught that a man must be hard, strong, and ready, and when their body no longer responds the way it did at 20 or 30, they feel a sense of loss, embarrassment, disappointment, and even despair. But the truth is completely different. Erection is not the whole story. It is not a measure of masculinity, and it certainly does not define your strength. What changes with age is not your worth, but simply the biological mechanism behind pleasure. When you move past 60, many factors begin happening at the same time. Blood circulation slows because the vessel walls become less elastic. Nerves transmit signals more slowly because the myelination process naturally declines with age. Hormonal shifts make sexual reflexes more calm. The pelvic floor weakens after decades of sitting, limited movement, or chronic stress. These are completely natural changes, nothing unusual at all. But the most important thing older men often do not realize is this. Pleasure does not disappear. It simply changes its form. It becomes slower, deeper, filled with more subtle sensations. It no longer comes from the degree of firmness, but from presence, from breathing, from the warmth spreading through the body, and from an internal connection with yourself. I told Leonard, at this age, your body isn't trying to race anymore. It wants you to feel. And he stayed silent for a long moment before asking, "Feel in what way?" I explained that younger men are used to quick, strong, instinctive reactions. But older men can reach pleasure in a completely different way, no less powerful, and often far deeper. When you let go of the pressure to be as firm as before, you open the door to experiencing pleasure through many other channels. Gentle touch, deep breathing, the warmth spreading through your body, and the sensitivity of areas most people never pay attention to. Many men return after a few weeks and tell me, "Doctor, I thought I had lost everything." But it turns out I was just looking in the wrong place. Some even say they now feel more connected to their bodies than they did when they were young, when everything happened so fast they barely had time to notice. This is not an attempt to comfort you. This is biology, a proven truth. Orgasm and erection are two different mechanisms. You can still experience a full, satisfying orgasm even when your erection is not perfect. You can still enjoy pleasure without comparing yourself to the 25-year-old version of who you used to be. The only thing you need is a shift in perspective, not asking, why am I not the same as before? But instead, in what new way is my body asking me to feel it? When you enter your 60s and beyond, you do not lose your masculinity. You simply move into a different stage of it, slower, deeper, more refined, and in many cases, even more fulfilling. Secret number 2, self-pleasure is not just about sex. It is about emotion in the nervous system. Not long ago, I met a 77-year-old veteran named Howard. He did not come because of pain or illness. He came because of a feeling he struggled to put into words. He sat down in the chair and spoke very slowly. "Doctor, I don't feel anything anymore. Not just that, but life." That sentence carried a loneliness I have seen in far too many older men. At first, Howard thought his problem was physical, but when I asked more carefully about his habits, the story slowly unfolded. He had been masturbating almost every night, not because of desire, but because it was the only way he felt he could relax, fall asleep more easily, and release tension. He had no idea that for many years, the action he believed was simply a biological habit was actually an emotional survival mechanism. This is a truth that many men in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s do not realize. Self-pleasure in older age is not just about releasing the body. It is closely tied to your emotions, your nervous system, and your mood. After every orgasm, the body releases dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, three important chemicals that help you sleep better, feel less anxious, reduce stress, and feel more connected to yourself. But when you perform that action in an unconscious state, when your mind is empty and filled with loneliness, that biological mechanism gradually loses its effect. The body keeps repeating the action, but the meaning disappears. It becomes a habitual motion that no longer brings relief. That is exactly what happened to Howard. For many months, he had been using this action to soothe a sadness he had never been able to name. He didn't know that his body was actually calling out for connection, comfort, and presence, not pleasure. And because he performed it without awareness, without emotion, without connection, his body gradually slipped into a state of neurological emptiness. He continued doing it, but he no longer felt anything. We, as men, were raised in a culture that demands strength, silence, and emotional restraint. As a result, many men only allow themselves to let go during that private moment. That is why self-pleasure in older age becomes an act with far more emotional depth than you might think. But when it becomes unconscious, when you do it to escape your emotions instead of connecting with your body, it loses its natural healing power. What Howard needed, and what many older men also need, was not to stop self-pleasuring, but to do it with presence. To be present in every sensation, present in every breath, present as an act of self-care, not as a way to fill an emotional void. When I guided him to practice mindfulness, slowing his breath, feeling his body, and allowing emotions to appear instead of being suppressed, just a few weeks later he said, "Doctor, for the first time in years, I feel alive again." That was not about sexuality. It was about the mind. Self-pleasure is not just about physical satisfaction. It is an emotion. It is the nervous system. It is a quiet form of connection with yourself. And when you do it with presence, it becomes a form of self-healing instead of an unconscious habit that slowly leaves you feeling empty over time. Secret number 3, use it or lose it. The truth no one tells older men. I remember very clearly one afternoon when Roy, a 74-year-old man, walked into my clinic looking confused and a little embarrassed. He had just started dating again after more than 10 years of losing his wife. He spoke softly. "Doctor, I met someone, but my body doesn't respond. I think I'm broken." That sentence carried the kind of pain many older men have carried for years, the fear that that chapter of their life has come to an end. But what Roy didn't know, and what many men after 60 are never told, is this. It is not dysfunction. It is simply lack of use. The male body does not just age over the years. It adapts to the way you live. If you do not stimulate the penis for a long period of time, the internal tissues, the smooth muscle, the erectile chambers, the blood vessels begin to weaken. The nerves become less sensitive. Blood flow gradually decreases. Elasticity fades. This is not being broken. It is functional atrophy from inactivity, the same way muscles weaken when you stop exercising. No one ever taught Roy, or you, or any man, that the penis is an organ that needs regular activity to stay healthy. When there is no stimulation for many years, the smooth muscle begins to shrink, the erectile tissue loses elasticity, the blood vessels function poorly, and the nerves start to fall asleep. The body assumes you no longer need it, and it slowly turns those functions down to conserve energy. Not because you are old, not because you are inadequate, simply because your body has adapted in the wrong direction. The problem is that many men believe that if they no longer have a partner, no longer have desire, or feel they are too old, then touching themselves is no longer important. They stop altogether, and that very withdrawal creates a downward spiral. Loss of sensitivity, reduced ability to get an erection, reduced pleasure, which then makes them think, my body is broken. But in reality, the body is only reflecting what you have done for many years. No activation, no movement, no maintenance. But the good news is this, that function can return if you begin to wake it up again. You do not need force. You do not need speed. You do not need a goal. You only need consistency and gentle stimulation. When I guided Roy to begin practicing again slowly, deep breathing, focusing on sensation, massaging the pelvic area, gently stimulating for a few minutes each day, his body started to change. At first, it was just a feeling of warmth in the pelvic region, then a slight tingling, then sensitivity began to return. And within just a few months, he came back to my clinic with a bright smile. Doctor, my body remembers again. That is what I want you to understand. It is not aging that takes your ability away. It is lack of use. Use it or lose it is not a warning. It is a biological rule. Cells, nerves, and blood vessels stay healthy only when they are activated, and self-stimulation, when done correctly, is one of the safest ways to maintain all of those functions. You do not need to prove anything. You only need to give your body the chance to remember. A little bit each day, gently, without pressure, without a goal, just being present, and you will be amazed at how much your body can recover, even at 60, 70, or 80 years old. Secret number 4. Porn may be quietly damaging your sexual reflex. One late evening, I received an appointment request from Ernest, a 68-year-old man who had been widowed for many years. He walked into my clinic with sadness in his eyes and said a sentence I have heard hundreds of times. Doctor, I still touch myself, but I don't feel anything anymore. It's like my body is disconnected. At first, he thought it was just a sign of aging. But when I asked more carefully, the truth began to reveal itself. Every night, he relied entirely on adult films for stimulation. It had become a habit, convenient, familiar, easy to access. But that very habit slowly shut down his ability to truly feel. Here is a truth many men over 60 never hear. Porn does not just stimulate you, it rewires your brain. When you are young, your brain is more flexible. It recovers easily after intense stimulation. But after 60, the dopamine system, the system responsible for pleasure and motivation, becomes less sensitive. When you repeatedly feed your brain highly stimulating, constantly novel images, dopamine surges to levels your body cannot keep up with. To protect itself, the brain reduces its sensitivity, leading to a condition called dopamine desensitization. This process happens slowly, quietly, but the consequences are unmistakable. You no longer feel strong sensation from real touch. You lose interest in real intimacy. You need more and more stimulation just to feel what you used to. And worst of all, the brain learns to respond to images instead of actual sensation. Ernest told me, I watch, but I don't feel. I touch myself, but it's like I'm not touching anything. I want connection, but my mind feels distant. That is a classic sign of a brain accustomed to such strong artificial stimulation that real sensation becomes faded. The problem is that this process happens silently, leading many men to blame age, hormones, or loneliness, while the real culprit is the dependence on artificial stimulation. But the good news is this change can be completely reversed. The first thing I did with Ernest was help him detox dopamine, completely stop adult films for at least 14 days. This is not easy, especially for someone who uses them as a way to ease loneliness. But it is a necessary step for the brain to reset its sensitivity. Then I taught him something very simple. Return to real sensations. Your breath, the warmth spreading through your body, your heartbeat, your own touch. No rushing, no goals, no effort to force pleasure. After just a few weeks, he came back and said in disbelief, Doctor, I'm starting to feel again. Not as intense as before, but deeper, more real. And that is what I want you to understand. Porn is not the enemy, but when you rely on it as your main source of stimulation, it will slowly steal your sensitivity, your imagination, and your emotional connection with yourself. Your body is not seeking images. It is seeking connection with yourself or with someone you love. It wants breath, rhythm, presence, slowness. Things a screen can never provide. At 60, 70, or 80, what you need is not stronger stimulation. What you need is to return to real sensation so your brain and body can recognize that they still have the ability to feel, as long as you give them the chance. Secret Sugar 5, self-pleasure is a lifeline that connects you to yourself, not a habit to abandon. I met Walter during a routine checkup. He was 75, soft-spoken, polite, and had never once given the impression of being preoccupied with sexual matters. But just as the appointment was ending, he paused at the door and turned back. His eyes held a bit of worry, a bit of embarrassment, and a great deal of hope. He asked, Doctor, at my age, is it still normal for me to touch myself? Should I keep doing it? That question carried something very deep. It wasn't about sex. It was about the right to feel, the right to live as a man, even at 70 or 80 years old. Walter had stopped pleasuring himself for more than 6 years ever since his wife passed away. He believed that chapter of his life had closed. He believed his age no longer suited such things. He believed it was not right, not proper, and no longer necessary. But what Walter did not know, and what I wish every older man could know sooner, is this. Self-pleasure is not just a biological need. It is one of the most important forms of self-care you still have in your later years. Biologically, that action helps maintain the health of the pelvic region. It increases blood flow into the erectile tissue, keeping the genital organs from shrinking or losing elasticity. It helps the prostate release trapped fluids, reducing the risk of inflammation and blockage. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, helping you sleep more deeply, feel less anxious, and recover better. But that is only the surface layer. What matters more lies much deeper. Self-pleasure helps you reconnect with yourself. When Walter lived alone, carrying his grief, his emptiness, and those long nights without conversation, his body was still quietly searching for something, a bit of warmth, a bit of presence, a bit of reassurance that he was still alive inside his own body. But because he believed he was not allowed, he denied himself that connection. Many men in their 60s, 70s, and 80s fall into the same situation. They live responsibly, quietly, rarely speaking about their own needs. And countless men among them forget that their bodies still need touch, attention, and understanding. Self-pleasure, when practiced correctly, gently, with presence, without force, without rushing, becomes a rare moment where you allow yourself to feel without having to be strong, without suppressing emotions, without proving anything. It becomes a small ritual of presence. When I explained these things to Walter, I saw his shoulders loosen, his breath lengthen, as if someone had just given him permission to reclaim a part of himself he had buried away. I guided him to start again very slowly, just a few minutes a week, focusing on his breath, on gentle sensation, with no goal and no expectation. A month later, he came back. His expression was completely different. He was eating better, sleeping deeper, and more importantly, he said, "Doctor, I feel alive again. I never expected something so small to make such a difference." And that is what I want you to understand. You don't touch yourself to stay young. You do it to stay alive, to stay connected, to preserve the part of you that age should never be allowed to take away. Self-pleasure is not something you should be ashamed of. It is not something you should abandon. At 60, 70, or 80, it may be one of the most powerful natural medicines you have for maintaining your health, your confidence, and the sense that you still hold your full worth. When you do it with presence, it is no longer a habit. It becomes a way of telling your body, I am still here, I can still feel, I am still myself. If you've watched this far, I want you to know that you've just done something truly meaningful. You listened to your own body. The 5 secrets in this video are not just medical facts. They are lessons thousands of older men wish they had known sooner. Your body is not failing. It is simply changing. And when you understand those changes the right way, you can hold on to your confidence, your sensitivity, and the sense that you are still yourself at any age. Remember, self-pleasure is not something shameful. It is not something you've outgrown. It can be an important part of your physical health, your emotional well-being, and your connection to your own body. If you found this video helpful, please hit like, share it with another man who might need it, and don't forget to subscribe. Every week, I share honest, simple guidance made specifically for men over 60. Age does not take away your worth. It simply opens a new chapter, and you deserve to live fully in that chapter. You still have so much to feel, so much to live, and so much value to give. Age does not take that from you. It simply opens a new chapter where you get to live slower, deeper, and more authentically with yourself.